Are we going? Okay. How could God create the earth and everything in it, knowing the long-term implications of man falling into sin? Before I go on, I need to check this. Okay. Before the long. So the question, obviously, let me make sure we're clear here. How or why would God create everything, knowing that everybody was going to fall into sin and everything was going to be terrible and chaotic and all that kind of stuff? But I first think we need to define sin. Just, as a side note, have I ever mentioned that the Christian New Testament tells us exactly what sin is? And if you think about it, it tells us exactly what it is not. Yeah, it's found in 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. That's 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. And it says, everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah, because sin is Torah, rebellion. Now, I realize the Christian Bible always says law, but what is law? It's the Torah. Am I correct? Of course I am. So if yours says law, just mark it out and write Torah beside it so that you'll always know what sin is and what sin is not. He who commits sin is in rebellion of the Torah, because sin, put very plainly, is Torah rebellion. If it's not against the Torah, if the Torah says to do it and you don't, that's a sin. If the Torah says don't do it and you do, that's a sin. Anything else, no matter how vile you may feel that it is, if the Torah doesn't say anything about it, it's not a sin. All right. So, and again, yes, folks, that verse is in the Christian New Testament. Anyway, how could God set everything in motion, all the while knowing all the horrible things that would happen? How can God just sit back and let things happen? How can God do nothing while babies and children are hurt, abused, tortured, and even killed by strangers and even their family members? How can a loving, just, all-knowing, and all-powerful God who is passionately in love with his children allow all those little children to go through things from which they will never recover? Did God do all of this just so he could have a relationship with a few special chosen people? Was his desire for a relationship that strong? Was it strong enough to just accept that free will would lead to all of this if you see the world negatively? I am often asked these questions, uh, but they are usually coming from atheists hoping to prove that there is no God, or at the very least, hoping to expose the ignorance of believing in God by exposing how cruel he must be if, in fact, he created all things good and, of course, bad. Some people become mad at God because of all the bad stuff in the world and decide to reject him and any belief in him, or spend the rest of their lives searching for a better God. Some of these people are willing to accept idols made of stone, wood, ceramic, or a group of gods who live in another dimension where some are good and some are bad. There is usually a difference between reality and the perception of reality, wouldn't you think? Would you agree? When it comes to God and his ways, reality is usually the opposite of man's perception. Atheists claim that they don't believe in God, but their actions teach us something completely different. We know they don't believe in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or even the Easter Bunny. But they don't write articles and develop television shows to disprove the existence of fairy tale characters, do they? The reality is that they do believe, but they are angry and are lashing out. They have been hurt by someone or something and blame God for it, or they are simply regurgitating something they read or heard someone else throw up. Atheists are also quick to blame God for every bad thing that takes place, while denying their belief in him. But think about it. To blame him is to believe in him. The name of this message is Ultimate Hope. The story of Adam, you know him as Adam, and Hava, you know her as Eve, was not a literal explanation of the creation of the cosmos and human life. It is a Hebrew mashal, a Hebrew parable. It's intended to teach its readers why the cosmos and human life were created. Not how, but why. I know what I just said goes against everything you know as a modern Jew and or Christian. But let's take a look at this story from the ancient Yehudi, which means Jewish, rabbinic point of view from which it was written. Yes, Moshe was in fact a rabbi. Please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scripture. For those of you who don't know, I am tethered, so I'll have to remain seated. By the way, this isn't a command from God, it's a tradition. We know that Yeshua, the Christians know him as Jesus, and all his Talmudim, his disciples, we know that all of it, that they all did this. They covered themselves with their talit. That's this thing. When they read the scriptures, prayed and worshiped. So we try to do the same as best we can. Our verse is from Bereshit, which is Genesis. It's from chapter 2, verse 18. Be'ivrit. In Hebrew it says, Vayomer Yahweh Elohim lo tov, heyot ha'adam levado e'esher lo ezer kenegdo. You may be seated. Okay, so we begin with Vayomer, which is from the word Amar. And literally, Vayomer is, and he said. That's literally. So it's, speaking of whoever it says next, we would say, and so-and-so said. But they say, and he said so-and-so. You follow that? So, and God said is how we would put it. But they would write, and he said God. Same thing. All right. So we're talking about Amar, which is to say, the primary signification is to bear forth, hence to bring to light, to say anything, to say this or that. It's sometimes to extort, to make a promise, to show something, to tell something, to declare something to anyone, to say to oneself, to think. That's also the same thing. To suppose. It's even used of commands. So basically, it's to shed light on the subject. The next word is the proper name of God. It's Yahweh. And for those of you who don't know, God only has one name. Now, wait a minute. I've got a book that says the 77 names of God. Oh, but I got a book that says 147 names of God. Or I got a poster that says the 14 names of God. What gives? Well, actually, God only has one name. There's only one name given for God in the biblical text, and that's Yahweh. That's as close as we can get to it. That's not the proper pronunciation, but that's as close as we're ever going to get. But it's God's proper name. All of that other stuff, you hear Jehovah Jireh. Okay, whoa, that's way out there. The real words in Hebrew are Yahweh Yirah. That's Jehovah Jireh, for those of you who are not following what I'm saying. Those are attributes. God is the provider for his people. If they love him and they keep his commandments, he then is their provider. It was all on this great big word if. If you love me, and if you keep my commandments, if you follow the Torah, then God will do all these things. He'll provide, he'll care for, he'll tend to, he'll take care. None of that's changed because God doesn't change. But anyway, I digress. So his name is Yahweh, which they could say, oh, it means the ever-existent one, though he was, he is, and he is to come. Well, yeah, it basically means he was, he is to come, as best as you can say it in English, but that's really not it. It's just that he is, he always has been, he always will be, is as close as we're ever going to be able to understand that in the English language. And that's good enough. That's okay. But in Hebrew, the noun doesn't really mean anything. It's just a name that God gave himself so that we would all know that he is, has always been, will always be, that he never changes. So that's his name. The other things are his attributes: the provider, the savior, the what are some of the things that he does? The healer, the all-knowing, the all-powerful. You know, all of those things are God's attributes, not his name. He only has one name. So it says God's name. Then it says Elohim. That's God. And in Hebrew, it's in plural. It's gods, not just God. It's from the root Allah. Yes, Allah. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah, you have. It's an unused root, though. They never actually use Allah, this root word. There is a word that sounds the same, but doesn't mean the same, that is used. But this word, this root, is never used in biblical text, which its meaning they give is to worship a deity, to adore, to be stunned or smitten with reverence. It's to be round, hence to be thick, fat of an abdomen, a belly, a backside, to say it real nice. So what does Allah mean at its root? It means fat butt. Yes, it does. Fat butt. And that's what the name that they gave, that the Muslims gave to their God, was fat butt. And that sounds, you know, kids will giggle and even adults will sometimes giggle, oh, he's a fat butt. And if you said that in front of a Muslim today, they'd probably get mad at you and you know, threaten to kill you and all kinds of stuff. But listen, that's what the word means. And in the time of the use of the word, that was complimentary. Because think about it, go back 2,000 years, go back 1,500, 1,600 years when they named him Allah, or 2,000 years when it was we were using these terms in the Bible, all the way back to 5,000 years for the Bible itself, the Hebrew Bible. But in those times, if you were fat, you were wealthy. And if you were fat, you were probably a king. You were noble. You were high and mighty and powerful and all these things, because everybody else was, you know, struggling to put food on their table, and you didn't always get to eat every day. And basically, people were skinny. So if you were fat, this was compliment. This was, wow, you're powerful, you're rich, you're awesome, you're all inspiring. And that's why they chose that word way back then. And of course, no one wants to admit to that now, but that is why they did it. And this is, in fact, the root of the word we use for our God. Uh, Part of it is, it says in the Jacinius, it says, look at the word El, strong, mighty, mighty hero. They say El, Elohim. Do you hear it? The L in the beginning of it. That means he's strong, he's mighty, he's a hero. El does not literally mean God, though it's usually translated as God. But it isn't God. It's strong, mighty, hero, that kind of stuff. And it is used of men. Then it says, see Eloha, which means God, majesties. It's used of the one God, the true God. But it's also used of false gods, whether men or idols. Properly, this word should be used in the singular of false gods and in the plural of the one true God. False gods are to be referred to in plural only when there are many of them, or when they're alive in the heart of their worshippers. False gods only have one attribute. If they are carved with a happy face, they will always have a happy face. And no, turning them upside down doesn't make it sad. It just makes an upside down happy face. The real God has many attributes: joy, heartbreak, anger, etc. And even if you think about it, when you're alive, even when you're asleep, your face is constantly changing. There's constant motion in the face. So it's properly, men should only be spoken of as gods in the plural, if there's calling them the men gods because they're mighty heroes and that kind of stuff. And it should only be done while they're alive, or referring to them while they were alive. You know, you can talk about them in the past in the plural as well. When men are called gods, because it's done so because they're of high position, or they're valiant, or heroic, or things, or rich, powerful. Governors and kings were called gods in the Bible. Yes, gods, the same word. Uh, Messengers from heaven are also referred to as God. Yeah, sometimes they called the messengers from heaven, not God himself, but the messengers, because they were powerful, because they were valiant. Same reason. So what is all this about? Well, when you talk about God, you talk about him in the plural, not because there's three of them in one living, individuals living, like married people, they become, no, it has nothing to do with any of that nonsense. You do it in the plural because when the God is alive, the face is always moving, the body is always moving, there's lots of attributes. So you say it in the plural to indicate that God is alive. When it says, let us make God in our, or make man in our image, whoa, there was a Freudian slip. Let us make man in our own image and after our likeness. It doesn't actually say that in Hebrew. The words are in plural, not because there's many of them. I hope you're starting to follow this. Not because there's many of them, but because God is alive. Follow that? All right, so it is in plural. Then it says lo, that's the negative article. And then it says tov, which is good, physically as a good. In other words, something, they'll say good land. Well, that's fertile land. It's a good tree. That means there's a lot of fruit hanging from the tree. It's good gold. That means the gold has been purified. So it's used of uprightness, of goodness and righteousness and kindness. It's even used of beauty. It's used of being pleasant and agreeable. Our next word is hayot, which is from haya. It's to be, to exist, to become, to come to pass. Usually when you read, it says that it came to pass. It comes from haya, the haya, and it came to pass. This word is written in the feminine plural, by the way. That's important. Our next word, of course, is ha-adam. That means the human. It's a man. It's mankind. It's the word for human in Hebrew. It's not a man's name. Yes, men got those names later on, and we think of the first humans that were placed here because we don't realize it's not a man's name. We think that it comes from two people. Not exactly true. Look at my teaching on Mashal HaShavuot. It'll explain it in detail. But it wasn't a man's name. It was the word for the human, the mankind. Then it says levado was our next word. So it's not good that mankind be alone, because that's what this word is. It's separation, to be separated. It's a part or a portion. He's not complete. He's not whole. It's parts of the body. When they say the members of the body, they're talking about the parts. Here's the finger, here's the hand, here's the wrist, right? The parts of the body, your members. Uh, it's to be separate and alone. And of course, then the example they give is our verse today. It is not good that the man should be alone. All right. So then it says, Eshe, that's to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. So it's literally saying, I will make something, I will fabricate something, I will manufacture something. Used of God, it's to produce, to create, as in the heavens and the earth, as in God's about to create something else, the woman maybe, to make anything, to produce it from oneself. God's going to create this from his own abilities. Then it says lo. Now, this is not the negative article. It's a sound-alike word. Lo can be the negative, no or not, right? But sometimes it's to him. Literally, it's to he or to it. Because remember, the he and the she in Hebrew are also the words for it, because it being a gender-specific language, when they don't just have a singular word it like we do, which can be both masculine and feminine You could even be neutered. In Hebrew, it is because it's gender specific. They will say he or they will say she, literally. And in this case, it's to he. But we need to think of this as to it in most cases. Then it says ezer, aid, it's help. It's the primary idea lies in girding, which is to put a belt on, because it surrounds, right? So you surround something, and so it's of defense. So people who tell you that God created the woman to, or the man to defend the wife, don't know what they're talking about. God created the woman to defend the husband. That's what it just said, because that's what ezer means. It's the defender, not the defended. But she will be created to defend against what? What are we talking about? We're talking about loneliness, right? That's what's not proper. That's why she's created, to stop the male part of the species from experiencing loneliness. But here's the part that always gets left out in the translation, the word kenegdo. You don't see this translated anywhere. In all of the translations that I've looked at, believe me, I've looked at many of them, I never see this this word being part of the translation of this verse. But kenegdo it's the front part, the front of something. It's the side of a thing which is next to the spectator, before or in the presence of, in the sight of, before all your people, before Yahweh, before the Son, over against, in front, because to be over and against me right now would be to be in front of me. So the camera that makes you able to see me is against me. It's in front of me. That's what they mean by that. It's as things which are to be compared, are put opposite one to another as over and against. So they're to be compared to each other. They're put opposite of one another. Does not mean in opposition. Doesn't mean that she's the total opposite of him. It's quite the contrary. It means that she's facing him. I'm here, she's there, and we're face to face. That's what they're trying to get you to understand with Kenegdo. The opposite to each other are set things to be compared. That's the most important part of this. Those which answer to each other, those which are alike. Hence, I will create help corresponding, help matching, help that is equivalent, help that is parallel, help that is identical to him. In the rabbinic teachings, kenegdo is often used in speaking of things which are like one another. So here's my amplified translation. And Yahweh brought it to light with these words. It is not pure, right, pleasant, agreeable, or fair that mankind should exist separated and alone. I will produce, manufacture, and fabricate help and strength for him that is equivalent, parallel, and compares in every way to him as a defense against it. Remember, the it is loneliness. The reason it wasn't appropriate for man to experience loneliness, you realize that God doesn't just make stuff up, right? There's something that he bases everything on. And so it should be obvious. If you understand Hebraic thought, you should be able to understand right about now that the reason why it's inappropriate for humans who are created in God's image and in his likeness, the reason why it's not proper for them to experience loneliness is because it is inappropriate for God to experience loneliness. All right. In Bereshit, in Genesis 2:20, it says, this is a rough translation, and mankind gave names. Mankind, not this one man, but mankind gave names to all the cattle, and to all the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for mankind there was not found a defense for him, for his loneliness. This was a Hebrew way of illustrating that mankind needed intimacy, not someone or something lower than them, not someone or something inferior to them. They needed someone who shared the same emotions, wants, needs, and desires. They needed someone exactly like them. There was a twist on this particular illustration in that we know that mankind can never be like God because he's created in God's image. So, if you understand Hebraic thought, Jewish biblical thought, that's what it is, you should be able to understand from this that God will eventually become like mankind. God will have to lower himself because man can never be exalted to that level. This ought to give us an insight as to the lengths to which God was willing to go to defend against his loneliness. It wasn't supposed to be like this, though. Mankind did not have to commit Torah rebellion. They did not have to commit sin. They chose to. They were not like innocent little children who didn't know the stove was hot. They knew exactly what they were doing when they made the decision to sin. God didn't create the world to let sin or Torah rebellion run wild in it. That's not why this world was created. He created the world in spite of knowing it would. And in spite of knowing the price he would have to pay to fulfill his needs and to make things right. Questions about our feelings of injustice completely ignore the injustice our Creator suffered without a bride, and the injustice he suffered to obtain one. God was alone, not because there was no one else around. There were angels, the messengers, and other various beings that God created to serve him, as illustrated. It's illustrated when God creates the animals and brings them to man. See, God had already done this. He had already created all that stuff, and it didn't help. And so that's what the illustration is in Hebrew. But there was no one like him in heaven or on the earth. There was no one to share God's wants, God's needs, or God's desires. No one could and would love God in the heavens simply because they wanted to. They did it because they were created to. No one for God to talk to. God knew what the price was going to be. Yes, he did. He knew how bad it was going to hurt to stand by and watch the people whom he loves go through such horror. But he also knew what the payoff would be. Now, before you start crying foul for the babies, elderly, women, and all other defenseless among us, get a hold of this. Life and death are completely different to God than they are to man. God is just, and contrary to popular belief of God-hating people, God has never sent the innocent to a fiery hell. Never. God has never dished out atrocities. Man does that. And no, God did not die and leave the atheist and other God haters in charge of making the rules that say God has to do something or else he doesn't exist or is cruel. Some men are cruel, but God is always just. Those who commit atrocities will be punished, while their victims will be recompensed. Believe in God is far more rational than believing in cosmic flatulence. Belief in God brings hope, while belief in the accident theory brings hopelessness. Here's the thing. God knew how he was going to feel the day you gave your whole heart and soul to him. And it's obviously worth it. He also knew how he was going to feel when you spoke words of love to him. Now, going to the Seferim Shaliach, going to the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 15:19, it basically says, if in this life only while we're alive here on earth, we have confidence in or cast our cares on and set our hope and confidence in Mashiach. If we only have hope of salvation and Messiah while we're here on this earth and alive, of all mankind, we are left in misery. Shaul, who is called the Apostle Paul by Christians, took it a little further and said, if our only hope in this world is of a Messiah while we're here and now, and nothing more because there is nothing after death, then those who seek only Messiah or salvation for this life are absolutely laid waste. They truly have no hope, nothing to live for, nothing to pray for or dream, nothing to dream of beyond the here and now. It's, this is all you get. Who would want to live that way? Who is so insensitive to human suffering that they would leave people in this condition? God haters, atheists, not Yahweh though. The big accident theorists say some murderers, rapists, child molesters, bullies, and other mean people get away with their crimes. But Yahweh has promised that people like this will get what they deserve. The big accident theorists say justice can be purchased and sold by those who can afford it. In other words, there is no justice. But Yahweh is a just God. He will dispense justice to everyone. The big accident theorists say there is no meaning in life. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Get all you can now, because this is it. But Yahweh promises those who love him that they will spend all eternity in a place where there is no evil. The big accident theorists say, take all the loot you can and leave no prisoners. But Yahweh teaches us to give all we can and set the oppressed free. The big accident theorists say, only an idiot would believe in something he can't say. No one can see air. Does that mean the big accident theorists and atheists are idiots too? Big accident theorists say no good scientist would believe in God. Actually, most scientists do believe in God. In fact, most believe that science came from God. The big accident theorists say evolution is a proven fact. There is proof of stagnation and change, cycling and recycling. However, evolution is only a fact to those who want it to be. The fact is, science cannot disprove the existence of God no matter what some may say. Further, no matter what some Christians or other religious people say, faith cannot prove God exists. But then, if it is faith, there is no mandate to prove it. Science has no mandate to prove or disprove God. So why do some work so hard to do so? Well, because these people have lost their scientific way and are following the way of the scientifanatical and the atheist. No one was there to witness the Big Bang when it supposedly took place. There is no audio or video evidence from the time. Thus, no one witnessed God saying, Vayahi, or let there be. Nor did anyone witness God not saying it. Did you know that many scientists are now arguing that the Big Bang theory, that the Big Bang itself didn't even take place? Some are now saying that the mathematical formulations used to bolster this theory didn't work from the beginning. And as you may know, the scientific-fanaticals that push this theory as fact are now demanding that we accept their new theories as fact as well. No one was there to document the formation of the stars, planets, constellations, black holes, clouds, earth, and mountains. No one was there to witness God breathe the breath of life into mankind. There is no video, forensic, or DNA evidence of any kind to prove or disprove God's existence. The lack of evidence, however, has never constituted a lack of reality. Scientists who disallow any talk of Christian beliefs are not scientists, they are religious fanatics. And given that there is a separation of church and state, their religion needs to be stopped in our classrooms. Further, Their government funding should be stopped because, as I've already said, there is a separation of church and state in our country. What used to be taught as theory is now taught as fact, not because science has improved and therefore sorted out the facts. Rather, it is taught as fact because some God hating religious fanatics hiding behind the veil of science have managed to push their religious fanaticism to an unbelievable extreme. To teach any theory as fact is to teach belief without proof, which is faith based belief. It is religion. Creationism is, by scientific standards, nothing more than a theory, but so is evolution. Teachers and scientists who teach evolution as fact are engaging in an irresponsible, faith based religion that they're calling science. It is deceptive and not true science. It is a religion of anti religion, a religion of anti God. Much of what science proves to be fact today will be disproved by the science of tomorrow. I hope you see that I am making a distinction between real science and the religion of science. The better God theory says our new God is better because he didn't create bad stuff. Well, but your new God didn't create good stuff either. The better God theorists say our new God is better because he doesn't require anything from us. Well, he doesn't give you anything either. The better God theorists say our new God is better because he doesn't allow children to be hurt, molested, or killed. Yeah, but he doesn't stop it from happening either. The better God theorists say our new God is better because he doesn't allow bad things to happen to good people. Well, but he doesn't stop bad things from happening to good people either. The better God theorists say our new God is better because he didn't hurt my feelings. Well, but God didn't hurt your feelings either. You just chose to blame me. Better God theorists say our new God is better because he didn't create evil. Well, but your God doesn't have the power to stop it either. If Yahweh God created everything, good and bad, then none of the other gods created anything. How are powerless, non creative gods who sit back and don't fix anything better than the creator of all? If all these other gods are better, why didn't they create something better? Why didn't they fix things? How powerful can a God be if he doesn't have the power to create or the power to make things better? How powerful can their God be if he can't do the things that Yahweh did? In the end, there is no other choice. Yahweh did it, or it was all just cosmic flatulence. A cosmic toot? Really? That's the best the scientific fanatical experts can come up with? There is no alternative. Either God did it, or it was all just happenstance. If the accident theorists are correct, bad things happen because there are bad people and people get diseases because they come in contact with disease. But wait a minute, aren't these the same reason the Bible gives for these things? Yes, I do believe so. I wonder if the scientific fanaticals and the atheists found their answers in the Bible. If the scientific fanaticals are right, then we are all just dust in the wind. Don't close your eyes, not even for a moment, because the moment will be gone. What difference then does it make if children and innocent people suffer? If they're right, what difference does it make? They're all going to be nothing more than dust in the blink of an eye anyway. Wait, didn't Yahweh say that we came from dust and will return to dust? Scientific fanaticism and atheism are cruel religions that give no hope, no comfort, nothing to look forward to. To make matters more hopeless, these two religions don't even give their followers something to hope for in the here and now. Those who live in this world will eventually die in it. The human body, though designed to live forever, begins to deteriorate almost from the moment of inception. The question isn't will we die, but questions are how and when. The atheists have turned the perception of reality completely around. They would have us all believe that all bad things should be blamed on Yahweh. But on the other hand, we shouldn't believe in his existence. Bad things don't happen because God created evil. Bad things happen because man chose evil over obedience to God's rule, which is his Torah. In the New Testament, in John chapter 8, verse 44, it tells us that Yeshua, that's Jesus, called the resistance, that's known as the devil by Christians. They call him the resistance. The Jews did. They called Yeshua, Jesus called the resistance, the devil, the father of lies. In the Jewish biblical world, the father of something is the originator of it. That means that the resistance created lies. The resistance is the father of evil, not Yahweh God. God did not create evil. The devil did, to put it plainly. Did God create the world knowing all this bad stuff would happen? Yes. Did he create the devil knowing it? Yes. He most certainly did. Creation was not an accident. An accident of that magnitude is statistically impossible by scientific standards. We cannot set a bomb off in a printing press and expect the Gutenberg Bible to pop out of the mess, any more than we can expect an explosion billions of light years away, millions, if not billions, and hundreds of billions and fragucha trillions of years ago could create a universe and everything that lives in it. Again, the statistical possibility of human life coming from an explosion of this magnitude in the cosmos hundreds of billions of years ago is impossible by scientific standards. God didn't create this world to let cruelty reign. He created it in spite of the knowledge that it would. For the most part, God does not interfere with the affairs of mankind. The Bible doesn't teach us that when we come to God, all things go well. Quite contrary to that. It teaches us that we will suffer. We know that God does at times step in and change the course of things, but the only examples we have of God ever doing that is when mankind was about to do something in conflict with God's plans. Example, Joseph, you know him as Joseph, was about to have Miriam, his wife, Mary, his wife, put to death. Yeah, put to death because she was pregnant. And in that time period, if a wife was unfaithful, see, they weren't, marriage in that time was, for the Jews, was two-part. You had the betrothal, then you had the marriage. They were betrothed, and he goes and picks her up, and she's big, fat, pregnant. Okay, so he didn't do it. He's thinking she's been unfaithful to him. He's about to have her put to death. So God puts a stop to it because that's against, obviously, his plans. But there's only a few examples of that even happening in the biblical text if you think about it. Very few. God really doesn't get involved. Because if he did, there would be no real choice. So while God may not get us out of our tragedies, he does promise to get us through them if we lean on him in those times. We think of these innocent people suffering and dying as this terrible, awful thing, but we know that they're innocent. And if they're truly innocent, I wish people knew that once they take their last breath, the next thing they're going to know is that they're in the arms of the Almighty God. Do you think that they're going to be upset that they died? Do you think they would even be upset about how they died? You think they're going to live with the regrets of the things that they didn't get to do? I don't. But like I said, while God may not get us out of our tragedies, if we lean on him, he will in those terrible times help us get through them. That's a whole lot more than the scientific fanaticals and atheists have ever offered to anyone. In Yahweh, there is hope of something better. In Yahweh, there is comfort in knowing that our loved ones have gone on to a better place. In Yahweh, there is hope of eternal happiness. Without Yahweh, there is only the bad stuff in this world and nothing to look forward to beyond it. I choose to obey Yahweh and have hope for my here and now and have hope in the world to come. Who and or what will you choose? Shalom, Shalom.